I will talk about Helene Bauer. As Michael already mentioned, there were several economists, economists by education also, as was Helene Bauer, who discussed in, let's say, years between 1921 until 1934, as they all actually left Vienna, about the political economy and about theories of value. And as Michael told us, we all know how important and how big the two most remarkable theoreticians of Austrian School of Economics, Ludwig von Mises and Friedrich von Hayek, have become, and especially nowadays they are regarded as the fathers actually of neoliberalism, and they played an enormous role in the so-called neoliberal revolution, so that enormous literature has been written on their lives and their works and their theories, but very scant attention has been paid to their early critics in Vienna. And these early critics, as Michael already mentioned, have come from the Austro-Marxist rows. So one of them, which I will talk about today, was Helene Bauer. Helene Bauer is not only famous as a wife of Otto Bauer, but as an economist in her own right. Helene Bauer was born in Krakow in 1871, and she held a PhD in economics and state sciences from the University of Basel, which was very rare for a woman back then to have a formal education in economy. And the more interesting are her contributions to these polemical debates against the Austrian School of Economics, because they have a scientific rigor that can only be expected from an economist. She started to write about, to polemicize with Austrian School of Economics as early as 1921. Actually, Helene Bauer published the most of her text regarding that issue in the journal called Der Kampf. She published very much in 1919 on work, on working conditions, on socialization, and on all pressing issues after the First World War and the construction of the new society and new republic in Austria. But the most relevant texts of Helene Bauer regarding this debate against the Austrian School of Economics were actually few texts from 1924. It was a bankruptcy of marginal utility theory. From 1925, Kassel's value-free social economy. From 1925, also on theory of market prices in Marx. In 1926, she published a text called Bourgeois and Socialist Economic Theory. She wrote extensively also on accumulation, credit, and imperialism. And she wrote also on the crisis in the world economy in the early 30s. So in 1931, she published a text on the crisis in the world economy. And in 1932, she published a text in the fourth year of crisis. That are basically the main texts in which she opens the different fields of debate with the Austrian economists, and above all with Ludwig Mises. And there are basically 3 points about which I would like to speak today. And this is Helene Bauer's defense of the labor theory of value against the marginal utility theory of value. Secondly, the question is why? Why does Helene Bauer does it? Is it only academic interest? She's economist and maybe she has only academic interest, but I don't think so. I think that motivation of Helene Bauer to engage in such lengths in discussion with Austrian economists have been primarily political, because these economic theories are not only academic writings. These are, so to say, the ideas about society, about how society should be. And this is the most important motive, I would say, that Helene Bauer brings in this discussion. And the very interesting is also a third point is in all these debates, Helene Bauer also she does not focus on methodology, of course. You don't see a clear methodological writings in her texts, but in the passages when in which she criticizes Mises, she actually poses a very interesting questions concerning the methodology and the way in which social sciences or the truth or factional social science should look like and what it wouldn't. So in one text, this is the text about the bourgeois and socialist economic theory, she says following. Can there be a bourgeois and a socialist doctrine within the scope of economic theory if it is limited to the establishment of purely empirical facts, without the one necessarily being wrong if the other is correct? When asked what the economy should be like, different answers are, of course, possible depending on the political, social, and ethical standpoint of the person who answers. But can there be opposite answers to the question, what is the economy now, what is factual economy, that are not based on a lack of knowledge or wrong conclusions and yet seem to be mutually exclusive? This is a very interesting passage, actually, who speaks a lot about her idea about the methodology in a social scientific approach. So we all know that Austro-Marxist, as Michael already mentioned, were actually trying to take scientific approach to economy. They regarded economy as social science with the emphasis on science, not philosophy. And as such, this economy must have had some kind of methodology. And this methodology that Helene Bauer mentions is empirical. And she stated purely empirical facts here. And this is very interesting because, as Michael mentioned, Hayek and Mises, their theories were based basically on theoretical assumptions, like liberal theories often are, on a priori theoretical assumptions, which are taking for granted, which are taking as a common knowledge, not to be questioned any further. And from that point, there was a corpus of theory, but these preliminary assumptions with which liberal economic theory, and especially Mises and Hayek, worked and operated, were basically nothing more but self-evident assumptions. And Helene Bauer tried, as all other Austrian Marxists, to subscribe to, let's say, even a positivist approach to economics. Mathematical, positivist, empirical, and so on. It is interesting, though, that at the beginning, Mises and Hayek and the entire Austrian school, as I said, their assumptions were based in assumptions. And the moment in which actually the liberal economic theory develops or got close to this positivist model as well is the time of the Cold War, as actually the liberal social sciences has to prove their scientific objectivity against Soviet idea of historical and dialectical materialism as a social science based in historical process and social process. So only then, confronted with that, liberal social sciences adopt, let's say, positivist approach to science and to social sciences, even trying actually to put economy and social sciences on the same level and equivalent to the natural sciences as something which can be proved beyond any doubt. Like, let's say, in astronomy, you can prove whatever mathematically. They tried to claim that it is also possible in the economy, even leaving this social scientific or multivariable system behind, because even that has not been good enough in their positivist approach. So they had this shift actually, which is very obvious from the 20s in the 50s and 60s. And Helene Bauer, I will now return to the theories of value. These theories of value, as we mentioned before, this debate about how the value in a society, how monetary value, how value at all is produced. What is value? Is the value a philosophical term? So let's say subjective, individual. What is valuable for me is unvaluable for somebody else. So is the value intrinsically individual and subjective and not to be objectified by any means in the monetary form? Or is the value something which can be objectified in the means of input, like labor, like material, like knowledge, like infrastructure, and so on? So actually, and Helene Bauer is, of course, the proponent of the labor theory of value, but she says that even behind these debates, there are not only scientific reasons. Even behind all that, it is actually a political motive. And she said that the margin utility theory actually substituted the older classical economical Malthusian apologetics of bourgeois class difference that could no longer be maintained in the view of strengthened labor movement. So basically, Helene Bauer thinks that marginal theory of value has been constructed in order to dethrone labor from its position of being the most important factor in the value production. So if the labor is dethroned, if the labor is one of many functions in the production of value, then the labor is actually not so important, and the strength of the labor movement might be subverted from that point of view. Because Helene Bauer said it is not Marx. Marx is not the first person who spoke about labor theory of value. The classics, Adam Smith and David Ricardo, already had these theories. But now the bourgeois economics, wanting to dethrone the labor out of political reasons, out of power reasons, has imagined another theory of value, which actually imagines some kind of individual, isolated host who lives in an isolated world with a certain amount of material goods. And he can determine basically about his needs, and accordingly to his very individual needs, the value of these needs can be established. And Helene Bauer, here is a citation of from one text, Bankrott der Grenznutzen, bankruptcy of the marginal theory of value, where Helene Bauer said, the subjective theories of value confront the individual, the isolated host, detached from the community, and thus historically indeterminable with a given supply of goods. The problem actually has always been of the political nature, and we should look into the history into the 20s in Vienna, where Helene Bauer basically on political terms refuses Mises' image of a liberal, rational, competitive capitalism that inexorably increases social wealth. We shall see these theories again in our time. Actually, this idea of rational theory, rational choice theory, they came back on these neoliberal ideas from the 20s, which inexorably increases general social wealth. This is also one of the commonplaces of contemporary neoliberal ideology. So Mises' sociological dogmas, according to Helene Bauer, are based on historically fictitious premises that he believes in liberal harmony supported by certain utilitarian kind of ethics. No war, no imperialism, no violence tarnishes the ideal Mises' world of harmonious free trade. It is also a citation. From his side, and we should put this debate in the context, from his side, Ludwig Mises was very radical, actually. He rejects any socialist or any assumptions about connection between capitalist development and imperialist world war, which from perspective of today looks actually rather ridiculous. But Ludwig Mises, and that is what Helene Bauer thinks about him, styles himself to be a lonely shouter in an allegedly socialist desert of the Red Vienna. He sees even bourgeois science undermined by the socialist culture endangering the extractionism. This is a citation of Mises that is certainly what he claimed in his text Anti-Marxismus, published in 1925. Mises went even further in his political action and engagement. Mises pleaded openly for the political liquidation of the labor movement, and he agitated for social cuts, as do neoliberals today. He countered the struggle for the legal protection of workers. He countered the struggle for the limitation of working hours. He countered the struggle against retirement funds, which from the perspective, of course, of today, looks very, very radical. So, but Mises, we must say that what we now understand as common sense, as normal, that the person has health insurance, social security, and so on, that precisely were the fruits of the battles fought in the 20s and in the 30s. That's why we now all over the world think that as normal. But as we see, and when we read Mises 100 years ago, for him, pensions, social security, limitation of working hours, this all is destructionism. He calls social security a source of new widespread disease. He did not even hesitate to support a civil war against unions. This is also this is now very understated fact in many biographies of Mises. Mises is now presented as a liberal, peace-loving person, but the reform policy of Red Vienna, according to Mises, was based on its terror apparatus that has to be countered with another terror apparatus if needed be. He even supported the existence of the reactionary self-protection associations that was also legitimate for Mises, at least so states Friedrich von Hayek in his memories to Mises. And finally, Helene Bauer summarized Mises' criticism of socialism on one perpetual basic thesis, that for him, there is no economic calculation beyond private property and beyond monetary accounting, beyond private ownership of the means of production, so that accordingly, there can be no socialist economic activity at all. The history had proven him wrong. And what is my last words, and really what I would like to emphasize, is that the methodological structure of Helene Bauer's analysis conducted in their research revolve around the concept as economy as a fact-driven science. And that was actually a novum back then. And this is also the point from which she criticized the subjective theories of value, from the point of actually fact-driven empirical economy. Thank you.
Maybe it's helpful if I moderate now so that you can focus on question and on answering. So please come forward with questions or comments. Yeah, I see Michael.
Yeah. I don't have to go first always. Well, just a short remark on the professional background of Helene Bauer. Was you are perfectly right. She was much more than just the wife of Otto Bauer. She was also at the head of a socialist study group, so she initiated many research programs and projects, and he educated a lot of people. She was by education also a statistician, and she taught statistics within the framework of the educational work of in particular in Vienna, of the Austrian labor movement. She knew a lot about this, and that is why we know that Otto Bauer very often simply used her as a critic, as a companion, and discussed a lot of his work with her. She had an enormous influence. Well, the question I would like to ask is the following. You're completely right. Helene Bauer is attacking von Mises also as a political opponent. But I think it is still more than that. And the criticism of the marginal theory of value has started many years earlier. For instance, Gustav Eckstein is one of the proponents of a very striking critique, and that is purely logical. So they try to show, Eckstein and others, that the marginal theory of value is not defendable on logical grounds. It cannot solve the problems it does create within its own framework. So it is an impossible theoretical program to explain the economy, certainly the modern economy, in terms of the marginal theory of value. And I'm not quite sure that she gave this up. She followed this as far as I remember. And second short remark, I do not remember exactly whether she did respond to Mises' Die Gemeinwirtschaft. You mentioned the basic argument. So Mises simply tries to demonstrate that socialism is unfeasible on logical grounds. There cannot be an economic rationality beyond capitalism. That is simply his argument. Did she respond to that or not? This triggered a long debate in the 1930s and 1940s, but I'm not sure whether she did respond.
She did respond, although not directly, but in several texts she mentioned. So it is not, she never dedicated an entire article to that, but she responded on several occasions in her subsequent articles.
Okay, right. I have to look again. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please, Stefan.
Thank you very much, Dunja, for an extremely interesting talk. I wanted to ask you, because you were talking about this sort of meta-analysis that Helene Bauer was engaging in, saying that all of these economic analyses, in fact, have a very political background and start from very political premises. Has she at any point dealt with Mises and his involvement with the Dollfuss regime? Because I'm sure that must have been, kind of a huge thing for the Austro-Marxists.
Yes, but the problem is that she published her last texts in the text that actually dealt with economy in 1932, and in 1934 she was already gone in exile. So actually, like these 30s, she had another text published in 1936, but not in the journal in Vienna, but in the journal on German in Prague, where she writes about fascism and economy. I still did not find the text, I must admit, but that was the last time she published anything concerning that. So this all debates, let's say, that would deal with fascism. No, actually, like you have 1932, the last input.
When did she die?
In 1943, in America. She was first in Prague, then shortly in Amsterdam, and from there she got visa to America. I think in 1941 already, or something. Yeah. There were already war in Europe. She got some emergency visa. I don't really know what it is, but with this emergency visa, she managed to escape to America, and there she died shortly after.
Thank you.